So I figured because we've already talked about the sailing ships and the steamships, plus the harbor defenses, in which I also mentioned one of them are specifically designed to deal with airships, that we might as well just jump in and see what these things are all about. You know, really seeing a picture on the wiki or like, I don't know, the small little emblem that you have here, it's not really gonna put two and two together, figure out what they actually do, how they work, and why do you actually want to start building these when you already have a bunch of ships going around everywhere? Well, I'll explain it to you in this particular episode, and I hope I do a good job and not try to fumble so many times. I have tried this intro about 6 times now. Let's get on with the guide, shall we? Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Anno 1800 Beginner's Guide series. As mentioned at the beginning, we are going to be discussing airships today. Airships came out with 2 different DLCs, the first one being the Passage DLC, in which case that is dealing primarily with the Arctic, and in order to get specific items to certain locations in that area, because I haven't discussed the Arctic quite yet, you're going to need an airship, and the airship in question is actually the one to the left, the red one. But after that, with New World Rising, the game came out with more airships and another way of building these, as well as making them a lot more optimal to have for trade, both interregional and international. There are a couple things when it comes to the airships I definitely want to mention. First of all, they are built using influence as well, along with aluminum profiles, so you can't use steel beams with these things. They are primarily built with New World items. Some of them are used with like the old-fashioned weapons, so those are with your armed variants, and you also have to have some steam motors. So at this point, because we were already talking about engineers in the actual series, I figured that it's good to also mention that when it comes to building these ships. Additionally, there are 2 variants. There's a helium type ship, and then there's Arctic gas type ship, but on paper, you wouldn't know what's the difference between the 2, right? They're both going to fly, they're both going to be fast, and they're both going to be effective. But really, is there a major difference? I'm going to tell you, yes, there is. There's enough of a difference to actually warrant optimizing these ships a little bit, and I'm going to explain it, because I've gone ahead and built every single one of these ships so we can take a look at it. All right, let's start with the very first one. Okie dokie, so the very first ship that we have here is the Boreas Class. Now, the Boreas Class came out with the Arctic DLC, that's the Passage, and it was primarily built with Arctic gas. Arctic gas is a very difficult resource to actually mine, extract, what have you. It is the equivalent of oil to a degree, but it requires so much planning in order to actually get right. It's like you literally want to rip your hair out. But this is very late game, I guess, because the Arctic region is just a difficult spot to be in. However, this is the very first one that they ever came out with, and it was primarily designed to allow transport between the islands up there to the glacier sites, because the glacier sites are not accessible via ship. And with New World Rising, they came out later on, and this is just a different ship skin to it. You can now build the same Boreas class, except using helium gas cells, which provides these buffs and debuffs. So with plus 100 hit points, it also results in those being negative 20%, negative 40%, all that stuff. So this ship is typically, if you have New World Rising, you're not going to really be utilizing this ship too much. As far as the quest line is concerned, it'll prompt you to actually build a Boreas class up there. So go ahead, you'll always have the one. Okay, you can sell it if you really want to. But if you don't, then you'll have an old-fashioned airship just like looming around. You can keep it up there, because you never know when one of those things are going to explode. So you can always just start ferrying some, I don't know, timber over there and some steel beams just to make sure you have enough to rebuild them. The different ship skins with this one, it really depends on what you have. Again, this is the default skin. You have a Cerulean airship, you have the Cream-Led Zeppelin, you have an Imperial airship, and then you also have the North Sea airship, which is the same as this one, which also has your emblem on these guys as well, which I think is a nice little bit of flavor. I really appreciate it, because I love banners, I love emblems, so I really like that little bit of added information. Because there are 2 different types of airships coming forward after this point, I'm going to be putting them both in the same category when it comes to the chapters of this video, so let's also keep that in mind. So the next airship is the Harpy. Now the Harpy is the smallest of all the airships. From this point on, you're going to be using aluminum profiles to build these things, so bear that in mind. We have a standard and we have an armed variant. The armed variant has a couple of guns. It's mostly at the top right there. They are pretty fast on the damage, so 55 damage per shot, so it's 31 damage per second. It's okay. They're really mostly used for harassing purposes. But as you can clearly see, they don't have a lot of health points, okay? These things are meant to get in and get out fast. One thing with airships is that they have this little button over here, plan drop run. You can provide people with, like, if there's a fire, there you can drop water on them. If you want to drop bombs on an enemy harbor, you can definitely do that. There are bombing runs, and specifically, I know the AI because I had to fight a really, really gruesome war. The harder the AI becomes, the more of these they actually spam. And I actually found, going up against Margaret Hunt, for example, I found that I was losing islands more to her airships than I was to her actual sailing ships. You know, that's one major thing. So these things are both pretty good. This one is designed for mostly transport, and I would honestly consider this one to be like more interregional airmail travel and transport because of how fast it is. And this one, because it definitely has one less cargo slot but two more item sockets, this one's a pretty good one just to harass the enemy. Okay, if they have the larger airships, which we saw earlier, these things are absolutely perfect. Oh yeah, great, there's an explosion, an assembly line, and biscuits. Yeah, that's great. Love how the game just reminds me it's still playing in the background. But the difference here, like what we saw with the Boreas class right over here that has the helium gas cells, we have these ones that have the Arctic gas chambers. Now this is a little different. These are complete buffs for these airships because they're primarily meant to be built with helium. With helium, you get only a base hit point increase. Normally it's around 100. But for these ones, the Arctic gas is allowing extra movement at 35%. So 35% plus the 25% is 55%. So these things are mega fast, okay? Damage from ships plus 40%. Damage from cannons plus 40%. All those things, it really factors in. Like, it tries to balance it a little bit, which is okay-ish. What you're really looking for here, above anything else, is the actual airship movement. That is what you really want to see. These things are very mobile, and you want to like micromanage it if you do have these, because they could get shot out of the air very, very fast. The next variant over here is the Manticore, which also does have a trade variant, and it also does have an armed variant. Do know that the armed variant is always going to have one additional item socket, while the normal one has one less, but an additional cargo slot. These ones are good for just some basic transportation of goods. If you just want to like ferry, for example, timber or one particular resource, or like let's say fried plantains in this region from one island to the next, these ones are very good to do that with. They're pretty fast. They're not as fast as the Harpies, but the good thing about these ones are the hit points are almost doubled, if not they're actually doubled. Yeah, they're pretty close to it. The other thing with the armed variant is it's 130 damage per shot, whereas opposed to this one's only 55. But the attack speed's a little bit on the slower end, but 65 damage per shot. I particularly use these ones because they're actually two gun emplacements, one on the very top and one at the bottom here underneath the actual cockpit, that really harass the enemy. These ones are phenomenal things just to get in, have a drop bombing run, and then get out. You know, that's really what they're for. In order to chase down smaller airships, you want to have like a combination of the Harpies plus the Manticores in your air fleet. They definitely do wonders. If you still have AI up, the Harpies would be a little bit better just to protect. These guys, because the maintenance costs are a little bit more than these guys, you're going to want to opt for those ones a little bit more. Especially if you're just doing like airmail travel with just providing mail to everybody. Those ones are just fine. These ones, if you want to be a little bit, like you want to flex a little bit, okay? The next one we have over here is the Hermes. The Hermes is neither a attack variant or a trade. It's just flat trade in and of itself. It doesn't do anything else besides this. It actually does have a cool design to it. I really actually like the designs of the airships here. You can try to zoom in on the cockpit a little bit more. You have that, and they do sometimes, like, you will see some goods like right over in here and like prop it up. It's actually pretty nice. Still same thing with the Arctic gas chambers. With this particular airship, it goes at 40% movement speed. These guys were at 35. These guys were at 20, excuse me, so they changed in between each one. 35, 20, and this one is at 40. So this one is fantastic to trade with. It's a very fast ship. At this point, you'll be going at 65% movement speed. This thing is fast, okay? Very fast for what it has. 3 cargo slots, 2 item sockets. Typically, what you would have in the item sockets are loading speed reductions and stuff like that. You can also get specialists to increase, like, the actual movement speed as well if you want to be like a speed demon, which is entirely possible, right? The maintenance cost on this is 720. Hit points pretty solid at 1600. It's an okay ship. It'll get what you need going. The thing that I have with it is I typically like to get the larger airships that have more slots available because I know that they're going to be able to be all-rounders, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But these ones, if you're transporting like just like one particular good, similar to the Manticore, very, very reliable trade ship to have. Don't really care about that person. So let's talk about the Pegasus. The Pegasus is kind of that outlier for me. Pegasus over here, movement speed increase here, 30%, pretty decent. But the thing about this one is it has 5 cargo slots, 3 item sockets, pretty good. What I tend to find with the Pegasus and why I don't use it as much as the next one coming is because of the 5 item slots. I think that's a little bit awkward, okay? I know some people that absolutely adore using the Pegasus. I am not one of those people. The reason for that is that I would actually prefer to have an airship that later on I can put more stuff in and not have to phase these out. If you feel like you're not going to have to phase out the Pegasus at all, by all means, build it. You have to be the one to really make that decision because it really depends on the situations that you're going to be facing. If you're, for example, bringing in one particular good, again, we'll use the timber example, Pegasus is perfect. Load every single one of those cargo slots with timber and just let it go to work and forget it even exists. But if you want to bring stuff like fried plantains, tortillas, bombins, ponchos, and for all intents and purposes, coffee, 5 slots, right? That's all you can do. And then what happens in the event that you're going to have to start bringing, for example, you're producing sewing machines here? Well, that becomes 6. Can you make 6 with this thing? No, you cannot. So this ship essentially becomes rather useless, in my opinion. That's why you offer the last Mac Daddy on this ship, on this list, which is the Zephyr class. The Zephyr class has 8 slots. Obviously, maintenance cost is high, and it is slower, obviously, given its size. We have 15% extra movement speed here, plus this one, which is making it faster, fantastic, whatever. But this ship overall is probably the most solid trade ship you're ever going to be getting, okay? Not many things can attack it. It's going to be relatively safe. The only things that really can are enemy airships and flak emplacements. It does kind of suck that it does only have 2 item sockets, but it does make up for it, in my opinion, when it comes to the 8 slots for cargo, okay? Because this is your ultimate cargo ship. Some of these things do actually have some different ship skins to them. Like, I know if you want to work for the Pegasus, I believe it's the Pegasus, you can actually do the, oh boy, it's the airmail sorting one for the scenarios, and it's just, I haven't done it yet, and I'm dreading it because I'm not a big fan of airmail, but that's another story for another time. But this is the other ship skin that you can get from the Grand Gallery, and it is the Queen's variant of the airship right here. And it does look pretty cool. I actually do like this one. On majority of my airships, I find the occasional one that's using the base skin, and I swap it over to this now. But this is the one that I prioritize over the other airships because I feel like it's a lot more versatile. And in this stage in my campaign, because I'm mostly focusing on trade and getting resources to and from certain locations, I find that the Zephyr class is definitely optimal going forward. Now, let's go over to the rigid airship hangar so I can show you the difference really when it comes to actually seeing both the Helium variants and the Arctic variants. Let me show you real quick. So this is the rigid airship hangar, and as you can see here, we have airships using helium and then airships using Arctic gas. They are the exact same when it comes to the designs. They are just different when it comes to the names, okay? So you have all these ones over here that require helium. In order to produce helium, you have to actually mine it. The process to get helium is not too difficult in the grand scheme of things because you already have clay pits over here. you already do have fish oil factories, and the industrial oil press is very similar to that of like a lumberjack hut, in which it has a radius around it. The saltpeter works are not constructed in the new world. Sorry, there are ways to get saltpeter over here in the form of electricity with alpaca farms, if I do believe. But you can always import this stuff in and allow it to actually produce the industrial oil that you need in order to produce the helium. So it's a very simple one. And clay, there's an abundance of clay everywhere. Okay, there's literally one clay deposit on this island to begin with, right? And you go over here and essentially, like, let's say if we want to build the Colibri, I believe I'm saying that hopefully correct, you're going to need aluminum profiles, sails, which are important, and 20 helium in order to build this thing. And the same goes for the Arctic gas variants, except these ones are going to be needing Arctic gas as opposed to the helium. That's what takes longer. It is indeed easier to extract helium than it is Arctic gas. Let me see if I can actually find an airship that's using helium. Ah, here we go. So this one, it's using helium gas cells for the Zephyr class equivalent, and it's only providing us with plus 100 hit points. Are these hit points actually going to be useful in any way, shape, or form? Absolutely not. Okay, at this point, there's nothing that can attack them. 100 is not going to matter. But for airships, maybe one of these actually does have... Nope, I'm not that lucky. Here we go. The Herald right over here, having Arctic gas chambers, is going to be moving faster, even with cargo. So it's pretty solid. When going on international travel, though, if we were to look for this... 170% movement speed on open sea travel is still less than the world-class reefers. So you can have a good mixture of the two, okay? You can have a good mixture of those things transporting to and from the different regions, but then these things can also be pretty solid when it comes to it. And just to give you an example of how fast these things can actually be, if we go over to this side, right? We're going to use, like, this Harpy. We're going to have it go to the side of this island Fort Arena real quick. It's just going to zoom right over there. They are very fast ships. Even this one, which is still using Arctic gas. I'm sorry, that one's with the helium. These guys are always going to be moving at a pretty decent speed. That's why they're very optimal to have for trade later on in the game. And they sound cool. I mean, you really can't go wrong with that. Sounds in this game, I mean, that's also one way that people really enjoy Anno 1800. It's like you go by, I don't know, some of the big lumbering ships and you hear their engines roar. So like these guys. Similar in nature with those ones, except you're dealing with propellers and whatnot. So the other thing that I want to show you is in the Arctic region. In order to build one of the Boreas class, you're going to need an Arctic airship hangar up here. But this is the only ship that you can build here. Okay, it's only going to be the Boreas class. And the reason why, again, they did this is because giving you a little bit of a heads up with this region, you do have little islands like these dotted around, right? But the way to extract Arctic gas is to go onto one of these, okay? And there's no way a ship can climb this glacier. Right? So you're going to have to build one of these sky trading posts, and the only way to get to a sky trading post is with an airship. This is, in fact, the production for the Arctic gas mine, and even with 640% bonus and items that take forever to get, it's still producing 1 ton every 42 seconds. So it is indeed very slow. Very slow, but a very valuable resource if you decide that you want to put it into actually building airships. The other thing when it comes to these particular airships are getting airmail actually set up. Now, when you go to a route, you'll notice airship routes, okay? Airship routes are primarily set, like it'll only show you the airships to begin with. So let's use the Earl of Sandwee 5, right? In order to do this, for example, we're going to be taking from Terre-d'Ange, right? It's only going to show you the local mail. And if you have New World and Arctic reports, these are other resources you can get. But essentially what you do is you would take local mail from here, and let's say we want to take it to La Isla, we would deliver it there. This changes from local mail into regional mail when it's delivered at another island, but the only way to get this to happen is with an airship. So that's another reason why they added these airships into the game. The faster, the better, to be perfectly honest with you. That's why the Arctic gas variants, especially with the Harpies, because of how fast they are fantastic ships to get stuff going to and from, especially when it comes to airmail. Airmail is something that later becomes pretty lucrative. Like if we go over to my mega capital over here that's not even quite done yet, we'll notice, like, for example, in this particular investor, they have local mail, they have regional, and they have overseas mail, which you can see how much they're actually paying for all this. So it becomes very important to have an, an airport over here. And this is indeed one of the airships that was actually transporting local mail to Rantium, being the capital over there. And it's bringing it from our neighboring town over here of Amaryllis, so that's pretty good. So hopefully that's a good intro into the airships. I hopefully answered every single one of your questions. We went into a mountain for a little bit. I was a little concerned. But so far, we've been doing fantastic with regards to this guide series. You guys have been providing fantastic input as well, and I really do appreciate that. All of your support, as always, is very, very much appreciated. And I will hopefully continue to get better over time, because I know that there's some elements of my commentary that are wanting, but that is just the learning process. I will tell you, it gets easier over time, so I've been told, and I like to ramble, which is also what I've been told. Anyway, until next time, my friends, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I very much did. I really like airships in this game. Don't really like the airmail sorting, but that's a whole different story for another time. Until next time, though, please consider like, commenting, subscribing, hitting that bell button, sharing it with your friends. Thank you so much for your continued support of me and the channel. Rooting me on means the world to me, and I will catch you on the next episode, my Rantians.